a great pleasure to be here. I'm not really an expert on all of this material, but I will try to pitch in. Perhaps I'll be able to bring a kind of transcultural perspective to the topic of the epic and traditions. Indeed, this confluence of 3 anniversaries is a really productive one for me, making me think back on these 3 artists, writers and filmmakers, and I think they really come together in an interesting way. One technical point I would want to make about tradition is how important the circulation of our heritage is to maintain tradition, and the fact that so many films in India's cinematic heritage are not easily available, I think is a real problem for this kind of a conversation. We're celebrating, for example, the 50th anniversary of Nege Dakatara. How many people in this room know this film? How many people have seen Nege Dakatara?
Can we say that? Yeah.
I only see about 5 hands. Is that possible? How can we, 6 hands, how can we talk about tradition? Is tradition something diffused in the air we breathe rather than on the screen? I don't think so. Tradition, I think one of the interesting points that came up in Amrik's discussion was the notion of citation and repetition again and again and again of key narratives, of key images, of key texts. And the process of literary adaptation, which is so much a part of Indian cinema's use of Tagore, is very much a part of that. I don't think that when he talks about rescuing cinema from the literary clutches, I think he abjures adaptation. Where would Indian art cinema be if it were not for literary adaptation? An incredibly important tradition, and adaptations of Tagore are at the very center of, I think, this tradition. I just recently looked at Nege Dakatara, which is, as you know, an intense melodrama made 50 years ago, a very contemporary, modern work about intimacy and emotion, and it is jam-packed of Tagore songs, Tagore citations, so I think that we need to put in brackets Tagore's problem with literary adaptation and remind ourselves how important the transfer, the adaptation from one medium to another medium is in this flow of tradition that we're talking about today. How can a melodrama, a very intimate melodrama, be also an epic? That's a good question, and I think we need to go back to Brecht, who was one of Gottak's many inspirations to think about that. And what did Brecht mean by epic? Obviously his Marxist aesthetics, his concept of historical materialist theater, world historical theater, is very important to that. Can an intimate melodrama be also world historical? Obviously, yes. The implosion of the family in Gottak's film is very clearly contextualized in terms of world historical events. It's very much a materialist melodrama. I don't know whether you remember in that film, those of you who have seen it, how materialist it is. Money is so much on the minds of all the characters in this film, and the exchange of currency is happening in every single scene in this film. We are never allowed to forget, is her name Bina? I think so, the heroine. how much her salary is, and how her Nita, yes, how her whole family is completely dependent on her wages, and how the historical context of her declining wages as an intellectual and teacher, and all of her both her ne'er-do-well brothers are dependent on those rupees that she's constantly handing from hand to hand. So I think that Gottlieb's genius in that film, that is 50 years old, is in merging the emotional intimacy of the melodrama with world historical epic format. Now I just want to make another point here before I wrap up. We were told we only had 5 minutes because we're still showing clips. Okay. In terms of citation and repetition, I just wanted to make a couple of other points. One of the beautiful repeated scenes in Meghe Dakatara are intimate scenes of couples out in nature with a train roaring past in the background. We know that Gottlieb's Soviet mentors loved metaphorizing trains about the force of history and the progress of the revolution. Probably Gottlieb wasn't being quite so literally about his train. In fact, I'm wondering whether those scenes with the train roaring past in the background are themselves citations not of his Soviet mentors, but of another Bengali filmmaker, the scenes in Patar Panchali where the trains are roaring past in the rural landscape in the background, while the intimate family scenes, the scenes of melodrama, are happening in the foreground. So citation and repetition, I think, is something that filmmakers repeating each other, responding to each other, reframing icons and iconography is something that is very much a part of this epic tradition we're talking about. I also want to make a final point, sort of building on the Tagore's most unfortunate phrase about the stupidity of the indolent masses. I don't know Tagore very well, but I think this kind of anti-populist reference in the letter or the speech he was giving might be taken out of context, because in Indian cinema, I think it is the indolent masses and their support of popular cinema, Bollywood and Tollywood and all of the others, that have done a great deal to keep the epic traditions alive. Everyone in this room knows how the Bollywood and popular cinema have constantly reframed, retold the same old stories from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and all of the other epic forms, just as in the West, our popular cinema are constantly retelling the stories from the Bible and Homer and our other epic traditions. I think that we should not only restrict our sense of tradition and the epic to art and cinema, especially since the institutional infrastructure for the art cinema, the NFDC and the other bodies are on such hard times these days. I think we need to think about the for example, the Amitabh multi-star vehicles of the 1970s as entering into a conversation, a whole cultural conversation about epic tradition. And maybe we should even be celebrating the intoxication of the senses rather than decrying the intoxication of the senses. The intensity of the popular cinema, the excess, the exaggeration and hyperbole of the popular cinema, rather than the minimalism of Kumar Shohani and Mani Cole and some of the other FTII graduates of their generation. I think that their minimalism must be seen in the larger context of the exaggeration and the excess, and I don't know what the opposite of the word minimalism is, the maximalism of Bollywood just around the corner. So let's keep that in mind as well when we're thinking about epic and tradition. And finally, in conclusion, thinking about Tagore and adaptation and epic, I can't stop thinking about Satyajit Ray and his adaptations of Tagore and the way he uses the original source novels like Charulata or The Home and the World to reinvigorate the literary clutches, situate them within world historical contexts. Two of my favorite films, I think Charulata is a recognized masterpiece, but I think The Home and the World from 1984, I believe, is suffering a little bit in esteem these days, but it will come back because that's what tradition is, the fluctuation of esteem and recognition. So just, I could not stop without mentioning those two great Tagore adaptations, and just a reminder, a final point about the essential value of literary adaptation, contrary to what we might have thought about, we might have gathered from this term, literary clutches. I'm in favor of celebrating literary clutches and sensory intoxication wherever we can find it. Okay.
You talk about problematizing all this popular culture, popular films, which are most of the time populist.